My mom had a secret relationship with my husband for 22 years. I 40F thought I had a happy marriage. My parents had been married for 43 years. I have 6 siblings and my husband and I had been together since we were teenagers. We started dating at 15, got married at 18, and built a life together. When I was 17 and pregnant with our first child, we moved in with my parents. Not long after, my grandfather passed away and left his house to my dad. My parents allowed us to live in that house and told us it would eventually become my inheritance. Over the next 2 decades, my husband and I raised our children, built a business together, and created what I believed was a strong family. We went on dates, exchanged gifts, spent time together, and rarely argued. Then everything collapsed on New Year's Eve. I had been away on a girls' trip and came home a day early because I was nearly 7 months pregnant and uncomfortable. All I wanted was to sleep in my own bed. Instead, I walked into my bedroom and discovered my mother and my husband together. For a moment, I couldn't even process what I was seeing. What shocked me even more was my mother's reaction. Instead of apologizing or looking ashamed, she yelled at me to get out of what she called their bedroom. My oldest daughter, who was 22 at the time, happened to be home getting ready for a party. She heard the commotion and came running out just in time to see my mother rush out of the house and run next door. My daughter was devastated. I asked her not to tell anyone until I could get answers. Then I sat my husband down and demanded the truth. What he told me changed everything. According to him, the relationship with my mother had started shortly after we got married when we were living with my parents. It hadn't been a short-lived mistake. It had been going on for more than 2 decades. For 22 years. As I started putting together timelines in my head, a horrifying possibility emerged. Some of my younger siblings were born during the years this relationship was happening. I immediately called my father and asked him to come over alone. When he arrived, I made my husband tell him everything. Watching my father's reaction was heartbreaking. He and my mother had been high school sweethearts. Their entire marriage had been built on trust, or so he thought. Soon afterward, he confronted my mother. The entire neighborhood could hear the argument. My older sister and I decided the rest of the family deserved to know the truth before rumors started spreading. A few days later, during a family gathering, we sat down with the adult relatives and explained exactly what had happened. The reaction was explosive. Most of the family supported me. Others accused me of handling it publicly and causing unnecessary damage. But once the truth was out, it spread quickly. People from my mother's church heard about it. One of her closest friends called me directly to verify the story. Not long afterward, my mother lost her position at the church. My father asked her to move out. She eventually moved in with one of my sisters. Then came another devastating development. My father requested DNA testing before deciding what to do about his marriage. The results confirmed that my twin brothers were actually my husband's biological children. At that point, there was no possibility of reconciliation. I told my husband to leave. He's currently living with his parents. Meanwhile, my father and I started discussing selling the house where so many memories had been destroyed. He wants me to have a fresh start somewhere else. My husband is furious about how things have unfolded. A few years ago, he started an HVAC business, and I played a major role in helping build it. I handled office operations, stepped away from my teaching career, and helped establish the company. Because of our state's laws, the business is considered a marital asset. The house, however, remains my father's inherited property. My husband has no claim to it. My mother doesn't either. More than a month has passed, and I'm still struggling with the betrayal. Not just because of what happened, but because of who did it. My mother spent years judging me and criticizing my choices, all while secretly carrying on a relationship with my husband. There are memories I can't even think about without feeling sick. When I was pregnant with my children, she was pregnant too. At the time, I thought it was special that we were sharing that experience together. Now I know the truth was far different. The fallout has been massive. Some family members have cut contact with me. My children have lost relationships with grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. I've developed stress-related health issues and started therapy almost immediately after everything happened. My older children are in therapy as well. My 14-year-old daughter knows why we're divorcing and is incredibly angry with her father. I've tried to remind all of my children that they're allowed to have their own relationship with him, regardless of what happened between us. But my 2 oldest want nothing to do with him. One of the hardest parts is learning how carefully this relationship was hidden. According to my husband, they met in countless places over the years. They became experts at keeping secrets. If I hadn't come home a day early, I might never have discovered any of it. And that thought still haunts me. 'Cause they would have continued. For me, this was never just about a marriage ending. It's about realizing that two of the people I trusted most spent 22 years choosing deception over honesty. What's hardest to accept is that my own mother was willing to risk her entire family for a secret she never intended to stop. And just when I thought I couldn't be hurt anymore, my husband delivered one final blow. During one of our mediated conversations, he admitted the relationship started after an argument we had years ago. Instead of talking to me about it, he confided in my mother. One thing led to another. Then he told me something I will probably never forget. He said he considered leaving me many times but didn't because it would have ended his access to her. Then he told me that, in his eyes, I had become a placeholder. Out of everything that's happened, those words are the ones that still keep me awake at night. My husband secretly called me a white whale 4 years while pretending to love me. My husband, 45M, and I, 36F, met about 6 years ago, and we've been married for 1 year. When we first met, I was very fit and athletic. But life hit me hard. Over the span of 2 years, I suffered 2 miscarriages and lost my mother to cancer. The grief crushed me. I became severely depressed and struggled to get out of bed unless I absolutely had to go to work. I stopped exercising. I stopped caring for myself. Instead, I turned to junk food for comfort and ended up gaining around 40 pounds between 2019 and 2020. Throughout all of this, my husband, then my fiancé, seemed incredibly supportive. He was loving, patient, and reassuring. I felt guilty for what I had become and even gave him several opportunities to leave. Every single time, he refused. Instead, he proposed. And last summer, we got married. Things slowly started getting better after that. I began healing. I worked on myself. I lost around 20 pounds, rebuilt my muscle, and even got my abs back. More importantly, I started feeling like myself again. My husband seemed thrilled. He constantly told me how proud he was and how happy he was to see me doing better. At least that's what he told me. Because on his computer, I discovered a completely different reality. For almost our entire relationship, he had been talking to his ex-wife behind my back. His ex-wife left him about 7 or 8 years ago for a coworker. That relationship eventually failed, and she later tried getting back together with him. By then, he had already met me. They never officially reunited, but they stayed close friends through messages and chats. She lives about 12 hours away, so most of their communication was online. And what they talked about absolutely destroyed me. My husband complained about everything. My job. My depression. My cooking. But most of all, my weight. He told her I disgusted him. He claimed it was difficult sharing a bed with me because I snored. He secretly took pictures of me while I was asleep, sometimes while I was wearing only underwear, and sent them to her. Then they mocked my appearance together. My stomach. My double chin. My back fat. Everything. His ex-wife thought it was hilarious. Eventually, she came up with a nickname for me. The White Whale. And from that point on, that's what they called me. The worst part? They weren't even having an affair. At least not physically. They didn't openly discuss getting back together. They didn't make plans to cheat. But they constantly talked about missing each other. They reminisced about their marriage. She flirted with him. He loved the attention. And none of it matched the man I knew. 'Cause the man I lived with acted completely differently. He never treated me like I disgusted him. He constantly told me he loved me. Our relationship was affectionate. Our intimacy was great. He hated spending nights apart from me. The way he looked at me, touched me, and cared for me made it impossible to believe he secretly felt this way. Either he was lying to her, or he was lying to me. And honestly, I didn't know which possibility hurt more. What I did know was that I couldn't stay. So I quietly started planning my exit. I acted like everything was normal. Meanwhile, I started applying for jobs in another city. I searched for places to live. I spoke with a lawyer. I began preparing divorce papers. And because we had been actively trying to have a child together, I also started taking birth control. One thing I promised myself was this. I would not let this send me back into depression. I would not gain the weight back. I would not let him destroy the progress I had fought so hard for. What a waste of love he turned out to be. Edit. Apparently some people were confused about the birth control pills. Before finding those messages, I completely trusted this man. We had a great marriage. We were actively trying to conceive. But after reading those conversations and seeing the photos he secretly took of me while I slept, something changed inside me. I suddenly realized I didn't know this person. I couldn't read him anymore. I couldn't trust him. I didn't know how long I'd have to continue living under the same roof while preparing to leave. I didn't know how he would react if I suddenly started rejecting him. I didn't know what else he was capable of. I didn't know if, during a weak moment, I'd forget everything and believe his lies again. So I took precautions. Simple as that. Thank you to everyone who offered support. I'll update when I know what happens next. Update. Hi again. I've never posted an update before, so hopefully I'm doing this correctly. But for the first time in weeks, I'm genuinely happy. And since so many people supported me, I wanted to let you know what happened. First, I never intentionally snooped through my husband's accounts. I was using his MacBook for work one day, and he had forgotten to log out of Facebook and Messenger. He had never given me a reason to suspect anything before that. After discovering the messages, though, I occasionally checked his phone. Part of me hoped I'd misunderstood everything. Maybe it was some horrible joke. It wasn't. He continued complaining about me to his ex-wife. Now he was telling her I had become distant and cold. He claimed he was tired of me. He even lied and said I was gaining more weight, despite the fact that I was actively losing it. At one point, he joked that we weren't being intimate because he couldn't find me under all the fat. His ex-wife thought that was hilarious. That was all the confirmation I needed. What made it even worse was how he acted around me. To my face, he was the perfect husband. He worried about me, asked if I was slipping back into depression, called me from work to check on me, brought home takeout from my favorite restaurants, did the cleaning and laundry, baked fresh bread in the mornings, bought flowers and chocolate, suggested nighttime drives whenever I seemed down. Years earlier, those drives had genuinely helped me through some of my darkest moments. How can someone be so completely two-faced? Thankfully, I had somewhere to go. My older sister lives in another city with her husband and daughter. They have a large house, and after I explained everything, she immediately offered me one of their spare bedrooms. I started applying for jobs in her city. After several interviews, one company made me an offer. The pay was lower and it wasn't exactly my field, but I accepted. I didn't want to stay with him any longer than necessary. The lower salary was worth my freedom. Besides, my expenses would be lower. I could even sell my car because the new job was within walking distance of my sister's home. My new position starts October 1st. I worked out my notice period remotely and prepared for the move. I also removed my name from the lease, although I agreed to cover 2 more months. Then came last Sunday, the day I left. The night before, I cooked a wonderful dinner. We spent the evening together. He whispered how much he loved me, how lucky he was to have me, how grateful he was that I was his wife. The next morning, while he was gone, I left. On the kitchen counter sat the divorce papers and my attorney's contact information. And I never looked back. When I arrived at my sister's house, I finally told my family everything. I showed them the conversations, the photos, every cruel message. They were furious. Since then, my husband has called and texted nonstop. Emails, messages, voicemails. He even showed up at my parents' house, but they turned him away and told him to let me go. Maybe he knows where I am now. Maybe he doesn't. Either way, it doesn't matter. He's begged for a chance to explain, begged to apologize, begged to talk. But my answer has remained the same. If he wants to say something to me, he can say it through my lawyer. My dad is furious that my mom actually agreed to the open marriage he wanted. My parents got married incredibly young. My dad got my mom pregnant, and because of that, both families pushed them into marriage. Shortly after I was born, my grandfather helped my dad start a business in a major city, and our family moved there. My mom came from a small, conservative southern town where she was raised to believe a wife should always be obedient and put her husband first. Even after moving to the city, she never really adapted to social life. She stayed home, rarely went anywhere, and didn't have any friends. Meanwhile, my dad focused almost entirely on work. He was always traveling, always busy, always somewhere else. As a husband, he was distant. As a father, he was barely around. To be fair, he made very good money. We never struggled financially. But growing up, it felt like he provided everything except his presence. 'Cause of that, my mom and I became extremely close. I'm a 22-year-old woman now, and for years I was basically my mom's best friend. We talked about everything. I hated seeing her spend her entire life sitting at home waiting for my dad to come back from work trips, so I constantly encouraged her to find hobbies and meet people. Took years. But eventually she started going to a nearby park regularly and made her first real friend, a gym trainer. That friendship changed everything. Trainer encouraged her to join a gym, and after a lot of hesitation, my mom finally signed up. Little by little, she started building a social life. She met new people. She made friends. And for the first time in decades, she seemed genuinely happy. Then everything exploded. About a year ago, my dad came home with a proposal. He told my mom he wanted an open marriage. According to him, he wasn't happy and felt she wasn't giving him everything he wanted. When my mom told me about the conversation, she was crying. She was devastated. As a deeply religious woman who had spent her entire life trying to be a good wife, she couldn't believe her husband was asking for something like this. I immediately suggested divorce. She refused. She said she didn't believe in divorce and she wasn't going to be the one who ended their marriage. But my dad kept pushing. And the more he pushed, the more obvious the outcome became. My mom's gym friend and I both eventually convinced her to agree. Not because we thought it was a good idea, but because we knew exactly what would happen. Through a lot of hesitation, my mom accepted one condition: complete transparency. No secrets. Everything would be shared. My dad agreed. At the time, my dad was 41 years old. He was overweight, out of shape, and honestly seemed very confident that this arrangement would work out in his favor. My mom was 39. She worked out regularly, was athletic, and looked amazing. I genuinely don't know how my dad failed to see where this was headed. About 6 months ago, I helped my mom create dating profiles online. The response was immediate. Hundreds of matches. More attention than she'd received in years. After spending months talking to people and carefully choosing who to meet, she eventually started dating. Confidence boost was incredible. She seemed happier than I'd ever seen her. Meanwhile, my dad immediately started seeing his secretary. And that's pretty much where his success ended. Side of that relationship, he had very little luck. Because of their transparency agreement, my mom told him about every date and every relationship she pursued. That's when things started changing. A few weeks ago, my dad yelled at my mom over something completely minor. Normally, she would have apologized immediately. This time, she didn't. For the first time in years, she stood her ground. My dad was shocked. Since then, it's been non-stop arguments. He constantly makes little comments about her clothes, her appearance, her lifestyle, anything he can think of. At one point, he almost called her a terrible name before catching himself. It finally seemed to dawn on him what open marriage actually meant. Recently, my mom told me he tried to talk about closing the marriage again. She immediately shut the idea down. After all, this was what he wanted. Now I honestly think they're heading toward divorce. Strange. My dad was never really there for either of us, but the idea of my parents separating still feels surreal. I don't feel sorry for him. I just wish he'd put the same effort into his family that he put into everything else. As for my mom, I've never seen her happier. Here is an update. Only a few days after my original post, everything got even worse. My dad moved out of the house. A week later, divorce papers arrived. Until then, neither set of grandparents knew what had been happening. When my dad filed for divorce, he told them his version of the story. According to him, my mom had been unfaithful. Both sets of grandparents immediately showed up at our house and started attacking my mom verbally. Thankfully, my mom had kept records. I had screenshots of conversations between my parents, and together we showed everyone exactly what had happened. Instead of calming things down, it made everything worse. The grandparents immediately started arguing with each other. Each side blamed the other's child. The house turned into complete chaos. Then another group arrived. My mom's former church friends. Years ago, they had looked down on her because she came from a small town. Despite always treating them kindly, they gradually excluded her because she disagreed with how judgmental they were toward other people. After making friends at the gym, my mom eventually stopped attending church altogether. Apparently, they never forgot. When they showed up, they started insulting her and calling her names. My mom finally had enough and threw them out. Things became even more ridiculous after that. Because my mom is currently cutting body fat and training regularly, she has very defined abs and arms. Along with all the usual criticism, some relatives started attacking her appearance, claiming she looked too masculine. Comments became increasingly personal and bizarre. Through all of this, her trainer friend has been one of her biggest supporters. She even connected my mom with the attorney she had used during her own divorce. Since then, my mom has spent a lot of time at her friend's house while trying to navigate the situation. And then we discovered something nobody expected. The business my dad runs? It actually belongs to my mom. Years ago, my grandfather set it up in her name. I had always assumed my dad owned it. Apparently, he doesn't. Now the entire divorce has become far more complicated than anyone imagined. The moment my dad is living in a hotel. The grandparents finally left after spending a week fighting and trying to force my parents back together. The divorce is still far from over, and I know there's plenty more drama coming. But for now, things are finally a little quieter. And honestly, after everything that's happened, I'll take quiet.
I'm leaving my wife tomorrow, and I've never been happier. I'm a 45M doctor, and tomorrow I'm leaving my wife. Honestly, I've never been more excited. My wife is 44 and we've been married for 10 years. Before that, we dated for 6. The strange thing is that I almost didn't go through with the wedding. Everyone wanted it to happen. My parents, her parents, my wife herself. The pressure was coming from every direction. But deep down there was a feeling I couldn't shake. Something felt wrong. I convinced myself it was just cold feet. Everyone gets nervous before marriage, right? So I ignored that feeling. Big mistake. The problem started almost immediately after we got married. On our honeymoon, instead of enjoying ourselves, she spent most of the trip complaining that I hadn't booked a nicer hotel. I thought maybe it was stress. Then the request started. She wanted a new apartment. Then a new car. Then designer handbags. Jewelry. Expensive gifts. And somehow, no matter what she got, it was never enough. It felt like the second she got the ring, our relationship stopped being about us and became about what I could provide. For context, I'm a physician. I make good money. But apparently not enough money. Not enough for the lifestyle she wanted. Over the years, our marriage slowly turned into something I barely recognized. We stopped having sex. We stopped laughing. We stopped talking about anything except money. We never had children. Before we got married, she talked about wanting kids. After the wedding, she completely changed her mind. Our house looks beautiful, like something out of a furniture catalog. But it doesn't feel like a home. There's no warmth, no comfort, no joy. Just expensive things. I hate it. And if I'm being completely honest, I hate her too. I'm 45 years old and work as a doctor, yet I barely have enough savings to support us for 3 months. 3 months. I want to retire someday. I want to enjoy my life. And I finally realized that if I stay in this marriage, neither of those things will ever happen. So I made a plan. I rented an apartment across town in a neighborhood my wife would call undesirable. I love it. There's a stack of IKEA furniture waiting for me to put together. The lease on the Mercedes she pressured me into getting expires next month. I'm replacing it with a used Prius. I start therapy next week. I hired a divorce attorney, and thankfully the prenup we signed before marriage should protect me from paying alimony. Within the next year, I hope to leave the high-paying job my wife insisted I take and move into something with better hours and a better quality of life. And yes, I'm probably going to ask out the barista who flirts with me every morning. Tomorrow morning I'm telling my wife. I already know how it will go. She'll cry. She'll beg. She'll demand therapy. She'll promise to change. But I'm done. This marriage was never right. My only regret is that it took me this long to admit it. I wasted years trying to force something to work because I thought it was the right thing to do. Tomorrow that ends. And I honestly can't wait. Update? Well, that happened. When I wrote my original post, I genuinely thought maybe a handful of people would read it. Instead, my phone exploded. A lot of people wanted an update, so here it is. Normally, I start my mornings with a run or a bike ride. My wife usually wakes up while I'm out, gets dressed, makes a smoothie, and starts her day. This morning was different. I spent almost an hour pacing around the kitchen rehearsing what I was going to say, over and over. When she finally came downstairs, something strange happened. I wasn't nervous anymore. I wasn't panicked. I wasn't even particularly anxious. I felt calm, almost relieved. I told her we needed to talk. She barely looked up from the coffee machine and gave me a distracted, aha. So I said it. Straight out. I told her I was leaving. I told her I wanted a divorce. I told her we hadn't been happy for a long time and that I felt completely unseen in the relationship. The reaction was immediate. The tears started. Then the blame. Suddenly, according to her, I was the problem. I never bought flowers anymore. I didn't support her enough. I didn't care whether she was happy. I reminded her that over a year ago I suggested therapy. She agreed. Then spent months making excuses not to go. I reminded her about the budget we created together that she repeatedly ignored. I told her how many times I tried to explain how I felt, only to be dismissed. The crying got worse. Then came the begging. She promised we could fix this. Promised she'd go to therapy. Promised she'd change. Promised everything. Exactly as I expected. And the most surprising part? I felt absolutely nothing. No guilt. No sadness. No hesitation. Whatever feelings I once had for her were gone. Completely gone. Listening to her plead felt no different than listening to a distant relative complain about their marriage. That emotional connection simply wasn't there anymore. Eventually, I got tired of going in circles. So I walked out. Since then, my phone has been nonstop. Calls, texts, voicemails. Some angry. Some desperate. Some threatening. By the end of the day, both her mother and mine were calling too. I spoke briefly with my mom and explained the situation. I told her my wife had drained me emotionally and financially for years. To my surprise, she was incredibly supportive. Right now, I'm sitting in my new apartment. The mattress in a box is finally opened. I stopped by Walmart and bought sheets. I picked up Thai takeout for dinner. I'm eating it at my kitchen counter while watching Netflix on my laptop. And honestly, I have everything I need. Tomorrow, my wife gets served with divorce papers. I keep waiting for sadness to hit me. But it hasn't. Instead, it feels like someone removed a 1,000-pound weight from my shoulders. For the first time in years, my future feels exciting. I'm going to travel. I'm going to try new restaurants. I'm going to take a job that makes me happy instead of simply making me rich. And yes, before anyone asks, I'm still planning to ask out the barista. Despite what the internet seems to think, she's age-appropriate, works at her family's business, and I'm perfectly capable of telling the difference between customer service and genuine interest. For now, though, I'm going to finish this beer. Then I'm going to take a walk around my new neighborhood. And for the first time in a very long time, I'm looking forward to tomorrow.
My ex-husband cheated on me with my sister, then emailed me 6 years later. I, 33F, never expected to hear from my ex-husband again, especially not after what he did. I met Dan, 40M, almost 15 years ago when I was celebrating my 18th birthday at a restaurant. He was charming, confident, and seemed so much more mature than the guys my age. From the beginning, he made me feel loved, valued, and special. Growing up, I always felt something was missing in my life. My parents fought constantly. My father would disappear for months at a time before eventually passing away when my younger sister Abby, 25F, was born. After that, my mom focused most of her attention on Abby. To be fair, she never neglected me and always provided for me, but Abby was clearly the favorite. Then Dan came into my life. For the first time, I felt complete. He was supportive, caring, and thoughtful. He took me on long drives, surprised me with gifts, and encouraged my dreams. After 4 years of dating, we got married. I wanted children right away, but Dan convinced me to finish my master's degree and focus on building my career first. He said we should be financially stable before starting a family. At the time, I thought I had found the perfect man. For 5 years, our marriage seemed happy. Then everything fell apart. One day, Dan told me he needed to leave town for a week. Something felt off, so I looked into it. That's when I discovered he had never left town at all. Instead, he had booked a hotel room with my sister. They had been having an affair behind my back for 6 months. I was completely devastated. Abby and I had always been close growing up. I loved her. I trusted her. How could she do this to me? After I confronted Dan, we had a huge fight. I demanded answers. How could he betray me with my own sister? A sister who had only recently turned 19? His response crushed me even more. He claimed he didn't love me anymore. He said I wasn't the same woman he had fallen in love with. He complained that I didn't give him enough attention, as if that somehow justified what he'd done. Then, in the middle of all this chaos, I discovered I was pregnant. I should have been excited. Instead, the stress became overwhelming. I lost the baby. And while I was in the hospital grieving the loss of our child, Dan never came to see me. Not once. He was spending the weekend away with Abby. Looking back, there had been warning signs. Abby was always unusually touchy with him. Dan would sometimes stare at her a little too long. But I never wanted to believe something like this could happen. My mother's reaction made everything even worse. As usual, she sided with Abby. She told me to make peace with it and move on. At that point, I felt like I had lost everything. My husband. My baby. My family. I honestly didn't know how to keep going. Then my best friend Tina stepped in and saved me. She was moving to another state and asked me to come with her. I immediately said yes. I was already divorced, and staying in our small town meant constantly risking running into Dan and Abby. I needed a fresh start. Moving wasn't easy. took time to adjust and heal. But eventually I met kind people who helped me rebuild my life. The trust issues didn't disappear overnight, but things slowly got better. About a year after moving, I met Tony, 32M. First, I kept my guard up. I was terrified of being hurt again. But Tony was patient. He showed me every day that he was trustworthy, loving, and genuine. His family welcomed me with open arms. For the first time in years, I felt safe. We got married a year ago. And now I'm pregnant with our first child. I finally have the life I always wanted. Then yesterday, out of nowhere, I received an email from Dan. Seeing his name instantly brought back memories I had spent years trying to forget. To summarize his email, he said he misses me. He claimed he had tried to find me but couldn't. He told me he was miserable with Abby. According to him, she doesn't care about him the way I did. He complained that I used to bake birthday cakes for him and throw parties while Abby only sends him a text message. He said she's rude, disrespectful, and spends most of her time at bars with friends. Then came the part that almost made me laugh. Apparently, Abby has cheated on him 5 times. The latest affair was with his own cousin. He also complained that my mother never holds Abby accountable for anything. He said he's planning to divorce her. And then he got to the real reason for the email. He wanted me back. He said he misses what we had. He wants us to be a family again. The irony is unbelievable. The man who destroyed our marriage now wants to recreate it. What makes this even funnier is that he probably has no idea I'm married. I don't use social media except for a private Instagram account. He doesn't know I have a husband who loves me. He doesn't know I'm expecting a baby. Honestly, I don't know whether to feel sorry for him or laugh. The grass wasn't greener after all. It was completely dead. Date 1. First of all, thank you to everyone who reached out and supported me. After reading your comments, I decided to send Dan one final email. I wrote, Dan, I'm sorry to hear you're suffering, but there is absolutely no future for us. There was a time when I would have taken you back without hesitation. That woman doesn't exist anymore. She died the day I lost our baby while you were off with my sister. I called you from the hospital and you never answered. Today I am married to an incredible man who loves and cherishes me. I am also pregnant with our first child. I am beginning a new chapter with someone who truly values me. Please don't contact me again. You made your choice. You chose my barely legal sister over your wife. I don't care if she cheats on you. I don't care if she disrespects you. People who betray others don't deserve loyalty in return. I've left my old life behind. You should do the same. Goodbye. Date 2. A lot of people asked what happened next. Well, Dan replied within an hour. He said he was stupid for believing I would still be waiting for him. Then he wrote something that made my skin crawl. He said he would always wait for me because I would forever be his baby doll. That used to be his nickname for me. Now it just feels disgusting. Not long after that, I received emails from both my mother and Abby. My mom congratulated me on my pregnancy and said she was excited to become a grandmother. Abby congratulated me too and said she couldn't wait to be the cool aunt. I couldn't believe what I was reading. These people completely abandoned me when I needed them most. Now they suddenly want to be part of my life again? Reading everyone's comments also made me realize something uncomfortable. A lot of people pointed out that both Abby and I may have been manipulated by Dan. I don't know. Part of me understands that possibility. But she still knew enough to understand that having an affair with her sister's husband was wrong. Through everything, I blocked all 3 of them. I'm already 5 months pregnant. I don't need the stress. Thankfully, my husband has been incredible through all of this. When I broke down crying, he held me. Then he took me out for ice cream. I hope one day I can fully move past all of this. Final update. I've calmed down a bit since my last update and wanted to explain everything more clearly. After Dan replied to my email, I received messages from my mother and sister through an old email account I barely use anymore. What scared me most wasn't the messages themselves. It was the fact that they somehow knew I was pregnant. I haven't posted any announcements online. I haven't shared bump photos. I keep a very low profile. So finding out they knew about my pregnancy terrified me. I immediately broke down. Thankfully, Tony was home. He sat beside me, held me, and reminded me that I was safe. He knows everything about my past. I've never hidden anything from him. I admitted I was afraid my mother and sister would try to find me. He reassured me that we're hundreds of miles away and living on the opposite side of the country. Then, because he always knows how to make me smile, he took me out for ice cream. Apparently, it takes 2 cones to fix a breakdown. We also talked seriously about my concerns. Since we're having a little girl, I worried they might try to involve themselves in her life. Tony told me he'd speak with his uncle, who works in law enforcement, and also consult a lawyer friend just to understand our options if anything ever escalated. He reminded me that Dan can't hurt me anymore. At one point, he even joked that he'd move to another country if that's what it took to protect us. As for childcare, some people suggested warning a daycare. We actually aren't planning to use one. I've decided to take time off work after our daughter is born and focus on healing and raising her. Thankfully, I have savings set aside and my in-laws live nearby. They're wonderful people and have already offered to help whenever we need it. I also have Tina and her wife Jenny. Honestly, they practically adopted me years ago. Between them, my husband, and my in-laws, I finally have something I never had growing up. A real support system. For now, my ex, my sister, and my mother are all blocked. I'm focusing on my husband, my daughter, and the family I've built. And for the first time in a very long time, I'm genuinely happy.